Greetings, class. Today I'm going to introduce you to Photoshop's Camera Raw filter and go over how I want you to approach getting to learn it and playing with it for your first assignment. So to begin, we're going to go to the File Open menu, and I'd like to begin by telling you that this is going to look different based on whether you're working with a JPEG file or a RAW file, or I should say a non-RAW file versus a RAW file. So I'm going to go over working with a non-raw file first, and then I'll go over the differences when working with a raw file, which gives you more control and flexibility when editing. So the first thing we did was open up our image. You can see over here in the layers panel that this is locked. The first thing we want to do is go to Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. This is very important because this is going to allow us to do what's called non-destructive editing, which means that we can come back to our original image at any time to make adjustments as needed. So now you can see this is unlocked and it's got this little icon right here indicating that it is a smart object. Next, we're going to go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and this is going to put a pop-up over Photoshop. You can toggle full screen mode in the top right corner here. Down here, you can see some of your zoom options, so you can set it to certain things, or you can click with your mouse and zoom in and out as you would like. You can also right click. I'm going to tell this to fit in view. Up here, you have your histogram, which is going to show you the values of your lights, your darks, your midtones, and where your colors fall in between. And these top triangular looking things will show you your clipping warning. So this one is shadow clipping. And if you click it, it'll have a white square around it that indicate that it's on. And it will look like this. So if you have areas that are too bright or too dark, they'll show up in different colors to help you identify them. And if you want to turn that off so that they don't pop up, you can. And so to show you what the black one looks like, black will show up as blue. You can see that those areas are now solid black. And the one for the white, it's basically saying that you've pushed your lights so far that they're showing up solid white. They've lost all detail, which you don't usually want. So I'm going to right click on this and click Reset to Default. You can do that at any time to go back to all your starter settings. And I recommend that you do that in between working and exploring the different options in the software. Underneath the histogram, you've got some EXIF data. So you've got your ISO, your focal range, your aperture, and your shutter speed. And then you have a variety of panels here, each with different settings. And then on the far right, these are different menu options that adjust different panels, so geometry, remove, masking, etc. We're not going to worry about any of these today. To begin with, I want you to just focus on the edit panel. And essentially what I want you to do is I want you to go through each of these panels and just play. I want you to drag them all the way to the right, all the way to the left so that you can see what they do. Play with each one at a time so that your eyes can see what's happening in the image. And when you go too far, just dial it back a little bit and just start dragging slower so that you can see where a pleasing setting might be. For right now, we're not going to worry about what's wrong or right. I want you to explore what feels or looks pleasing for you or interesting for that matter. But you will want to either type in 0 to reset it between each one or go back to reset to default so that you can really tell what each setting is doing. So here we've got contrast, we're reducing contrast, increasing contrast, exposure is affecting the overall brightness of your image. Highlights is just going to recover or reduce detail in the highlights. You can see it here. Sometimes it's very subtle. You've got to really watch. So like for instance, the highlights to see it better. I'm going to boost the whites, that's boosting the lights in the image. And now I'm going to slide that highlight back and forth so I can see. And I can see right here, I'm recovering all the detail that I can and it's still blown out. With this not on, it'll sometimes light up just to indicate that you do have some stuff that's blown out. So now I'm going to drag it back down and I can watch that histogram slider or this little part right here to see when I no longer have lost detail. This is going to control the black point in your image. It also kind of affects contrast in a way. Basically, it's boosting the black. If you hover just right over the words here, it will describe a little bit of what it does. We'll be covering some of these more in depth in the future. This week, you have a lot to take in, so I want you to just focus on playing with each of these things. So, white balance is the overall temperature of your image. You'll be learning more about that in your reading. You can adjust it manually right here. You can make it more warm or more cool. This goes from blue to yellow. Basically, it's adding those colors overall to your image. The tint goes from green to magenta. So you can use these two settings to fine tune the white balance of your image. However, the easiest way to start is simply to use this eyedropper tool right here, white balance, and to find something that's neutral, preferably white or gray in your image. This just happens to be perfectly balanced. What are the odds? However, ultimately, the white balance of an image is up to your creative vision. So let's say I want this to be a little cooler. And then vibrance is going to affect the saturation of some of the colors in your image, whereas saturation will affect the saturation of all of the colors in your image. So pull saturation all the way down and you have a grayscale image, pull it all the way up and you've bumped up the saturation of everything, which can be too much. Notice that when I pull vibrance all the way down, I still have some red and some yellow in this image. It's not completely reducing the colors and it's not completely bumping up everything. But also notice that we're getting artifacting, pixelation here. We're getting some strange things happening. So as you go through and you play with images, you also want to pay attention to at what point are you pushing the image too far. And so you may want to zoom in from time to time to see, are you getting some strange artifacting in places? You know, if you only see it, if you're zoomed all the way in, it's probably okay. So effects. In effects, I almost always add just a little bit of dehaze to reduce atmospheric haze that happens. It'll make your image a little crisper. It'll bump up the color a little bit, but too much is too much. You can also dial it down. You can use this creatively in different ways, but usually just a little bit of a dehaze. That's usually one of the first things I'll start with. I'll start with getting the exposure right in my light settings and adding just a little bit of dehaze. Texture affects the texture in the image, basically like sharpens it. See, that's probably too much right there. Clarity looks at the edges of objects and sharpens those. A little bit of clarity can be very nice. Vignette is more of a creative tool. Pull it all the way this way, you're going to get a white border. All the way this way, you're going to get a dark border. If you do use a vignette, usually a very subtle vignette works the best. And then you can add grain to sort of give it an old-timey look or just a little bit of texture. The curves panel is another way to adjust the lighting and the color in the image. Play with this, but don't worry about it too much right now. Curves is a very powerful tool that we'll take a look at later once you're a little more familiar. But generally speaking, what's called an S curve is what generally looks best. So down here, your darks, up here, your highlights. You tell like this is already like way, it's affecting it a lot. A really handy tool is down here in the bottom right. You can toggle before and after. So right here, we can see the changes we've made. If you go too far with this, you know, like you can very easily, like you pull it over, you can do all kinds of weird, crazy things. I mean, you know, that actually kind of looks kind of fun in a trippy, surreal art kind of way. But we want to learn how to do things properly first and then go play creatively. However, today I did tell you to play around. Let's reset that. Color mixer. This is a very powerful interface that can be super fun to play with. So you can adjust the hue, the saturation, or the luminance of individual colors. So like for instance, we can shift that red to more of an orange or more of a pink. We can shift the oranges to, you know, slightly, let's see, that's more orange than yellow. We can shift the greens. Go back and forth to each extreme so that you can really see what parts of the image it's affecting, and then go back in and dial in your subtle adjustments. Saturation, you can make that red brighter, you can desaturate it. The yellows, what if we, I'm not going to reset this before I go here. You'll get the gist. This luminance is referring to the lightness. So notice that's getting lighter, now it's getting darker. Oh my goodness. See, this is what you pay attention to. Make sure you don't push it too far. Even there, you can tell it's too far because it's pixelating over here. But we're just having fun with this for the moment, so just play. I think play, I want to encourage you to play as much as possible. It's the best way to learn. So just get in here, have fun with it. Embrace some of this weird wonkiness for today, just playing with what you can do, and then reset it to default, start over, and then make it good. Color grading. This allows you to apply color shifts to the midtones, shadows, and the highlights. There are different options up here, but just to begin with, we're just going, here is the midtones. We're applying blue to them. The shadows, let's go for kind of a purple in the shadows. And this down here just allows you to balance what range is being affected. Kind of like that dreamy quality right here. Usually for me, if I go one color on one, I'll go the opposite for the highlights. In the center, so white is mostly neutral. And as you go further out, you're saturating it even more. You know, you just find kind of a happy medium. I've already played with this and I have a few examples that I'll show you in a minute of options that I did that I thought were fairly pleasing. Detail, this is going to have sharpening, which allows you to sharpen the edges. So I always encourage you to zoom in when you do your sharpening. Now this is a JPEG and it's a rather small resolution JPEG. So it's going to start to get wonky really fast. This is one of the advantages of working with a raw file, because you can see now we're getting this like weird square grid. So you really don't want to sharpen this very much at all. I mean, really, not really any. We get a noise reduction, which can help compensate for that. But notice that the whole image is going soft. So you're losing this detail here. And then we've got colored noise reduction. Sometimes you can have a lot of noise in just the colored areas. So you can see right here toggling back and forth that that's a lot softer, but that's not necessarily a good thing. It depends on what your goals for the image are. So reset to default. Optics, this is adjusting the optics of the image. You're probably not going to use this very often. The only time you're really going to come in here would be this is another area where you can apply a vignette. It's probably like the quickest, easiest way to apply just a little bit of a vignette, which can sometimes be very nice. Defringing is an advanced thing that can be useful if you have weird color fringes around the edges. Lens blur, honestly, this is a new feature that I haven't played with that much. Some of these features are going to work best with raw files. There are options in Camera Raw that are only available for raw files. So now let me show you the difference. Well, I'm going to hit OK here and just show you that that layer that was now locked now has a smart filter on it and a camera raw filter, and you can toggle. I guess I should have left some settings on it for you to see, but you can toggle this on and off to be able to go back and forth to your original image. So now let me show you what it looks like when you open a raw file. It can be any kind of raw file, but in my instance this is for a Nikon, so it's an NEF file. And I already have some presets on here, so let me reset this to default. Okay, so here's our default image. So you can see that this opened up its own screen before going to Photoshop. It's got a few more options over here. It's got a rating system at the bottom, this down here. Really, the biggest thing I want you to know about the raw interface is that it has what's called snapshots, which is you can basically save different edits of your image as snapshots, like basically like little formulas. And I've created some to show you real quick. So you've got all of these same options. So most of the panels and settings are the same. The biggest difference is that you're going to be able to push your settings even further because a raw file is not processed. So you've got all of the original data uncompressed, whereas a JPEG has already been compressed and processed a little bit. We're able to push that a lot further before it starts looking super wonky. Notice that it does not look nearly as crazy up here as it did in the other one. We've got more pixel data to work with and it's not compressed. However, my favorite feature of working with raw files is the snapshots. So I went through and I played with some settings and made a few examples to show you. So these first few, I only worked with the light panel, just adjusting the light settings. And since one of your assignments this week was to do a normal exposure, an overexposure, and an underexposure, I made examples using the settings to simulate that. So this would be my normal exposure. We can toggle right here to see the difference. You see it's still a normal looking exposure, but the colors are boosted. It has a lot more pop. Then I've got my overexposure, my underexposure, and instead of just making these completely dark, like I made an overexposure and underexposure, I made it to where it was still visually pleasing and had some detail to share. And then I did a black and white version just using the light panel. And then this one has a little bit of a vignette. And just to show you how you can work with that. Up here, you've got a black and white. You can convert this to black and white and then work with the lights and the darks the same way. And if this was a longer class, we would actually start with just editing in black and white to help you really understand some of these values. We can go down to the color. Here it's called the black and white mixer. So it knows what items in the image are red, what was yellow, and it's just going to lighten or darken those tones. So this is also a great option to play with, and we will do some black and white editing in the future. So going back to my presets, there were a few that I did just a little bit of extra just to have fun with. So color boost, color grading. So this is changing the tint of the highlights and the shadows. This is just a little preview of some of the things that you can do with just the basic edit panels in Camera Raw. So dive in, have fun for this week. Just experiment with each of the sliders, start to get comfortable with it, and then make one edit. It can be as normal looking or as out there and weird as you would like. However, when you post it, you do need to explain your creative vision and also mention what were the main settings you used to achieve the look that you were going for. So jump in.